here today from BRVO Mining to talk about the Luanga project. And I think perhaps show you something just a little bit different. You saw Joe's presentation. He showed you the enormous exposure that PGMs in general have coming out of South Africa and Russia, and some of the limitations there. And so I think show you something here is a major PGM deposit out of Brazil. I guess Brazil's probably not that well known for PGMs, but I think you might be a little bit surprised to see something like this. Luanga was discovered, well, I guess, by Vale. They've worked on this back in the 90s. The major discovery work done in the early 2000s, and the majority of the drilling work by them. And it's basically been sitting in the bottom drawer since that time. So BRVO as a company was only floated on the TSX here in July last year. It's a group of people that has a lot of experience in Brazil. Some of the guys are sitting there in the front row. We have a long history in Brazil. We have a long history of development of projects in Brazil. I think the last project that I was involved with personally with this same team of people, discovery drill hole to first concentrate production was just under 5 years. So I think that sort of capacity compares pretty well to some of the things Joe was saying about 15 to 20 years. In terms of tier one, probably not maybe quite as tier one as Waterberg that you've just looked at, and I think there's some fair comments there, but I do think this is a fantastic project, and I'm going to show you why. Pará State in the north of Brazil, I know the place well. I've lived there for 12 years. It is a fantastic place to operate, and I guess you should start just by looking at where it is up there in the north of Brazil. It's up in the tropics. Rain is pretty constant all year round. In terms of the infrastructure there, there's a lot to talk about there, and you'll see some of the radical differences between the north of Brazil and some other countries around the world that are tending to struggle a bit with some infrastructure. This is an exploration play. Obviously, we're certainly seeing a lot of drill results coming out in the market at the moment, and we're going well, but I think their exploration risk side is obviously pretty low. The company's in a pretty strong position. Obviously, I said we just IPO'd. Management have the majority of the shares. Our biggest shareholders behind that are BlackRock, followed by Tembo. Some of these guys are here in Toronto at the moment, and you'll see after that, then it goes from Franklin. We've got RCF. These are well-known people. We've got some serious supporters behind the stock in terms of writers and internet supporters, and then you get into the retail. We're in a strong capital position. We still have, we raised about 45 million. We still have about 28 million in the bank as of about today. Market cap of the company is about 330 million. And you can see from the graph at the bottom there, the acceleration in that price is obviously heavily driven by drilling results of late. I spoke quickly about the Carajás. You see it here. Luanga's pictured there on the left-hand side. It sits within the Carajás mineral province. It's 400 kilometers wide and it's about 200 kilometers in breadth, and it's basically a mineral province. There's nothing else there except cattle. I think the nearest indigenous population is about 50 kilometers away. Similarly, the only national park. And basically, you've got 40 years of infrastructure there that was built by Vale. So it's their world's biggest iron ore mines are there. You have world-class copper operating mines there. It's all there. The rail, the access to the port. Power in Brazil as a whole for the whole country is 80% hydroelectric. In this region, it's 100% hydroelectric. So you see the major power lines, they are feeding directly from the dams that are within our state. In terms of deposit, you have 8.1 kilometers of strike. This isn't going to be underground. This is going to be under pit, open pit. Vale completed 50,000 meters of drilling there. We have all that core. We're resampling all of that core. We will end up with a brand new clean database. You see that there is a historic resource there. The target here will be to convert that over, and we've done that work so far in the phase 1 program. And the key in that resource is that there is no rhodium reported, because 20 years ago, rhodium assay was expensive and rhodium was not worth so much. Fatal flaw metallurgical work has been done. You can look at that in the technical report that's out there on CEDAR. You'll see the recoveries. You'll see the typical concentrates that are coming out there. You'll see that there are 0 deleterious elements in that. I don't expect that that's going to change anytime soon. The work we will do will simply prove it up and then improve it. The resampling program is, for the most part, completed. We are just reconfirming the work that Vale's done. That's going well, and you'll see in some results later on that, in fact, we're improving those results. We've basically completed the drilling component. So in terms of the phase 1 program, we are now moving on to the resource modelling, and we hope to get that out in the second half of this year. And you'll see that from then going into this year, the focus will be extending that resource at depth, and then obviously a major focus turning to exploration. And I think going back to that initial slide, you see that's really where we're going, or we've gone in terms of the share price in these last couple of months, has been a focus on some fairly interesting nickel results that are coming out below this deposit. So we all knew that there was a PGM deposit here. We all know it's 8 kilometres long. We know it's only drilled in the top 150 metres, and I think it's fairly obvious to see where you have to drill to then take it down to 300 metres and what's going to happen to that resource. But I think the exploration is what we'll get talking about next. 23-24, basically there are a number of things that are going on at the same time. So typically, if you look at the success we had previously in Brazil with operating, producing and operating other mines in this exact same region, it was a case of we started drilling, we knew what we had, and we started permitting and everything else all at the same time. So they all land at the same time. So that's how you get from discovery drill hole to actual concentrate sales in 5 years in this region of the world. Just a quick snapshot as an overview. You can see the Luanga deposit there in the top left-hand side of the picture. I think the most interesting thing there, obviously you can see it's 8.1 kilometres long. It's basically a bog standard layered ultramafic intrusion. The key highlight to that whole picture is really this. The intrusion is turned over 90 degrees, it's lying on its side. So you now have an ore body or a deposit that's essentially subvertical, and it outcrops its surface. You can rock chip it anywhere you like along that 8.1 kilometres. So basically what you're looking at here is potentially an 8.1 kilometre long pit. In terms of the slide you're looking at now, again, you're seeing we've split it into 3 sectors that we concentrate on separately. You see basically it's drilled to 150 metres, more or less, from surface. So in terms of where we're going, it's turned that from a historic resource into 43-101. Then we go into the expansion stage, we drill the next 150 metres, and that's how you see how you double it. There are some holes there that go down to as deep as 450 metres, and again, all of them penetrate mineralisation at depth. This slide, I think, is probably a little bit complicated, but in a nutshell, if you look at the very bottom line there, you see 109% average. And what that's telling you is basically where we've resampled the Vale holes, the historic drilling, we're generally getting slightly better results. And that's consistent. It's consistent in more than 80% of the holes that we've resampled. There's no rocket science there. I think the explanations are fairly simple. There have been some changes and improvements in PGM, dissolution and assaying in the last 25 years since the original work was done. But I think principally it's fair to say that we are essentially gaining nearly every drill hole. We are gaining on rhodium, because rhodium was not wholesale assayed in this deposit 25 years ago. Rhodium assays were expensive, as I've said. But I think if you want to look at that in more detail, it's probably better to go to the website or download the presentation. It's a pretty complex thing. I think in the last month, this is where things have really highlighted the interest. It's the obvious proposal in front of you there is that there's the deposit, it's in the top 150. You can see where the resource is going to be. You can see where it's going to extend. But then what happens at depth? And like most of these types of layered ultramafics, it's the depth extension that matters. And you're now starting to see, going down deeper, the deposit is getting wider. As we move into that brown color, that is the ultramafic footwall, where not a lot of drilling has been done historically. And immediately you get into the ultramafics, you're now seeing high nickel. You've got 4.6 meters there at 1.2. The last slide you had 11 meters at 2% nickel and 1.2% copper, and you've still got the PGM grades there. So essentially, this is what's been driving our share price in the last month or so. There have been some spectacular grades. I don't expect to repeat those grades on a weekly basis. Some of them are truly exceptional. This intersection here, 93 meters at 3, is probably the widest intersection we've ever seen in the deposit. 16 at 36, that includes 3.6 grams rhodium. In particular, there's 8.5 meters that has 6.5 grams of rhodium, not 0.1 of a gram, not 0.2, 6.5 grams. And I think, you know, it's fair to say you can see that that kind of stuff is what's driving the share price. You're not going to find 6.5 grams of rhodium in many places. I think the rest of this stuff I've basically covered. We get the resource out, we upgrade the resource, and we get into the exploration. That's really everything. Thank you.